Auction Talk with Steffes Group. Welcome back to the studio, Max. So anything new happening in your life?
Well, it's good to be back in studio, and I'm happy to report that I am a new dad.
Really?
Yeah.
Now, you are a third-generation auctioneer, and obviously with a new family member. Do you have any hopes? Have you picked out a baby name? How have things been going?
Well, we did name him. Took us 2 or 3 days. Calvin's his name. Calvin Scott Steffes. Kind of cool homage to that second generation, which is my father.
Mm-hmm.
In terms of hopes and aspirations, let's get out of diapers first.
Okay. Well, congratulations to you. And again, we haven't had a chance to visit since the Big Iron event. How did things go? A lot of conversations at that event in West Fargo?
Yeah, it was good to be back in the booth, and I would tell you that traffic was probably up from what we typically saw. Good conversations, saw a lot of familiar faces, and had a lot to talk about because we're right in the middle of our busy season.
Yeah, busy season indeed. And it seems like this time of year, Max, you guys get busier than ever right now before the end of the year. Is that a trend that you see every year? The November, December timeframe, is that when a lot of folks want to move stuff, sell stuff, buy stuff? What have you seen?
Yeah, historically, it's kind of a misnomer. People think that we slow down perhaps in the winter months, but actually that's when we get the most busy. And we've always typically worked around the farmer's schedule. We want a captive audience at our auction sales. And of course, in the summer months, it's hot and people are spraying, they're busy. So most of our selling seasons occur in the fall and the spring of the year after the crop has been harvested and before it's planted.
Okay. Let's talk a little bit about land prices. Some of the recent sales that we've seen, record prices in the Midwest. And I had a question for you. Rising interest rates, higher input costs, the farmland market across the Midwest and Northern Plains remains strong. Do you think sales will continue to be robust? What have you seen in recent sales? And if you did have a crystal ball, what do you think we're going to see as we get into 2023?
Well, the interest rates has certainly been a subject of conversation. From my professional standpoint, I always thought that it was going to affect land prices this fall. 8.25%, I've heard, for 25-year money. And so on and so forth. But we have not seen that transpire. And one thing you got to remember, Rusty, is farmers value land above all else. And we've talked about that before. So the sales results have reflected a very strong and robust seller's market. Just last week, we were in Morgan, Minnesota. We sold some land in Redwood County, Minnesota for $13,300 an acre, typically in an area where land has been trading for $7,500 to $10,000. So that's appreciated some. Also last week, we were in Carrington, North Dakota, north of town there, $6,500 an acre, which historically has been valley prices. So it's crazy what's going on in terms of the interest and the demand that's out there for the farm real estate that we're selling at our auction sales.
Okay. Now, let's talk about who's buying and who's selling. Some experts, Max, would argue, according to my research, that historically farmland has been a great inflation hedge, and everybody's talking in the news about inflation. Is this a hedge that investors are getting into, farmers? What are some of the trends you're seeing? Who is buying? Who is selling?
Well, in terms of a hedge against inflation, obviously, if I didn't think land was a good investment, I wouldn't be very good at selling it. So I think it's a spectacular place and a hedge against inflation. In terms of who's buying, it's kind of funny. We hear about the Bill Gates purchase and we hear about, Chinese purchasing farmland. And I think that probably gets overblown to some degree. Most of our purchasers on our auction sales are farmers. For instance, those sales that we just talked about, the Morgan, Minnesota sale, that was a farmer. The Carrington, North Dakota sale, 2 of the 3 tracts were purchased by farmers. The 80 was purchased by an investor. In terms of who's buying, I would tell you that if we're going to throw spit on the wall, 80 to 90% of our purchasers and bidders and buyers are farmers, local area farmers. The other 10 to 20% would be investors typically. And every auction is going to be different in terms of the registration and the makeup of the bidders. And we like to see that cross-section of farmers and investors to keep everybody honest and get that price discovery that we talk about. Of those investors, over half typically have local ties. So they might own land around the property. They might originally be from the area. They've been successful in their professional endeavors, and they're looking to invest in a familiar area and asset.
Okay. Now, explain to me a little bit, Max, about some of the folks that are selling land. You and I talk so much about families that are trying to maybe adjust, whether it be a death, whether it might be diapers, might be a diploma. Who are the folks that are selling land, and how do you try and walk them through that process? Because it's not an easy decision, one, to let go of a piece of land if it's been in your family for a long time, and maybe circumstances come up where it's just time. Those have to be really personal discussions.
They do, and we've talked about that before. We don't take those conversations lightly. But in terms of who's selling, I would tell you that 75% of our sellers are families that have inherited the farm, and the lion's share of those individuals that are electing to sell have perhaps owned it undivided with siblings for a number of years. Mm-hmm. Typically, they're 55 to 85 years old, and dilution, ownership interest with multiple individuals really makes it difficult to maintain and ownership of that farm. And I'll use an example. So say, for example, 3 siblings own a farm, 320 acres, in 1/3 ownership interest. So say, for example, they both have 2 kids. 3 becomes 6 very quickly in terms of that ownership interest. And that 1/3 interest becomes 1/2 of 1/3 interest in 320 acres very quickly. So it's difficult as people age and progress to maintain ownership of that property, and they're ultimately electing to sell. I would tell you that the other family element would be, our seller's mom, dad, grandpa has died, and the family's elected to sell it right away for similar reasons. The other 25% of our sellers are going to be investors that are looking to flip land and make a profit, farmers occasionally, to raise some money, corporations, foundations, and other property owners.
Okay. Now, just speaking from personal experience, one of my friends in the building recently had her mother pass, and they had just a small tract of land. And that's the conversation that she was trying to figure out with her siblings. And we can talk about a small tract of land, 16 acres, or a bigger tract of land, maybe 116 acres. Those conversations, when it comes to good tillable land, what are those buyers looking for out there these days, Max?
Our buyers are going to be looking at the soil profile of the farm. The soil productivity index is a metric that people look at in terms of the overall quality of the farm.
Sure.
Other attributes that farmers, we don't have to tell farmers what's good land, and most farmers don't have to look at a soil map to tell you if that's good land or not. So they're doing the eyeball test in the 32 years with the pickup window rolled down and looking at the crops. But the other metrics and elements that people look at, things like access. How easy is the farm to get to? Is there a good section line road? Is the road maintained? Drainage. Is there water that sits on the property?
Sure.
Are there alkali issues? Are there improvements that need to be made? Are there trees that need to be moved? Is there a farmstead in the middle? There's all sorts of attributes that people are going to be looking at.
Okay. When it comes to a farmstead, do you think having an old farmhouse on a property, if it's a small tract of land, do you think that makes it more attractive to some buyers that I want to get out of the city, I want to be somewhere else? Does that add value?
It depends on the location and the condition of the farmstead. There are times when that farmstead can actually be a negative.
Okay.
Simply because most farmers don't want to farm around a farmstead, and they don't want to have to deal with some meth head moving in a junked out farmstead.
Yeah.
So they want to control that farmstead typically. Yep. And we make those decisions on a case-by-case basis.
Okay. And speaking of case-by-case basis, you sell farmland in all sorts of states, and we talked about a couple of states here recently. Have you seen values increasing in one area of the region compared to other areas of the region?
That's a really good question, and I would tell you that it's pretty broad in the scope of appreciation. So I would tell you, last year we had 697 auctions in 11 states. We saw that appreciation all over the place. Yeah. It wasn't just in the valley. It wasn't just out west. It wasn't just in Iowa.
Yeah.
farmland has appreciated drastically over the last 24 months.
Okay. Now, speaking of appreciation, can we turn our attention to used equipment and some of the recent sales you've seen there? I mean, some of the things we were talking about off mic before we started rolling tape, you've seen some used pieces of equipment that have gone for sale at auction, and the values of them have increased so much just over the past, 24 months, 36 months? Some crazy numbers out there, Max.
Yeah, it is. And I would tell you that those are a direct reflection of the cost of new. So let's just use a specific example. Last night we had Brian and Sherry Fieberger's farm retirement auction in Cooperstown.
Okay.
And they had a nice 2018 John Deere 9620 RX with about 1,700 hours on it. No PTO or anything. That machine brought $498,000, which is just remarkable. A used tractor for almost $500,000. But you know, tying it back to the cost of new, you go on John Deere's website right now and you take a look at a 9RX 590 tractor, and the base list price is $858,000.
Is that right?
So it's remarkable to see the cost of new escalate and the cost of used equipment follow that, and that's what we're seeing.
You know, I think this is a topic that you and I have talked about over the past couple of years. You know, pandemic, supply chain issues, those kind of things. That's all playing into the market. Would you agree?
Oh, 100%. The other thing is availability.
Yeah.
You know, that 590 RX tractor that I just mentioned, the list price is there, but you can't go to the store and buy it right now.
Yeah.
I don't even know if you could get one next year or 2024. It'd probably be mid to late 2024.
Yeah.
So that tractor that we sold last night was right there, and you could go pick it up and go use it today if you wanted to.
Yeah, exactly. Kind of circling back to the Big Iron Farm event, that seems to be one of the issues that from the farm shows that I've been to, for folks who want to display their brand new stuff, sometimes they just don't have it. It's not off the assembly line yet.
And I feel bad for those dealerships that are trying to sell tractors and sell equipment to paying customers that are walking through their door and saying, take my money.
Yeah.
And they can't.
Yeah, no kidding. Okay, let's talk a little bit about the commodity price market and the environment that we have. We've talked about inflation. We've talked about the potential for higher interest rates. Commodity prices at this point strong for many crops. Looking ahead to 2023, again, will we see robust prices for farm equipment, for land? What's your feeling of all the sources that you talk to? What's kind of your forecast for next year?
Well, we don't have a crystal ball. I'll preface that conversation with that. But I would tell you that our leading indicators, we watch those very closely. And you mentioned the first one, commodity prices.
Yep.
The second would be interest rates. And the third would be yields. Mm-hmm. In terms of what we're expecting, strong demand through 2023. These supply chains are not going to be worked through until the end of 2023 at the very earliest. In terms of the interest and demand for farm real estate, we'll see if the interest rates start affecting things. They have to at some point, but I just think there's such a gluttony of cash out there that folks are looking to invest, and that's helping us out a little bit in terms of the value of land.
So we talked about some of your thoughts about 2023 and what we might see ahead, what we may see ahead. But what do you have going on until we get to 2023? We mentioned how busy you guys are for sales and things like that. What kind of things do you have coming up on the calendar?
Well, Rusty, we're right in the middle of our November run of auction sales, which has 65 auctions in 9 or 10 states, and we're selling 7,100 acres of land, all sorts of farm equipment auctions, construction equipment auctions, dealer liquidations. So we're going to get a lot of practice between now and the end of the year. Yeah.
Do you normally see that kind of a trend when it comes to November, December, getting into the end of the year? Do people make the decisions because it's just the end of the year and they want to get things done before the first of the year? Are those kind of considerations that go into their decision-making process, do you think?
Absolutely, both on the buying and the selling side of things. You talk about the 179 deductions. which is over $1 million, I believe, this year. So there's going to be a lot of buyers out there that are looking to maximize their deductions. And for sellers, you said it, they want to finish things up before January 1.
Well, Max, I appreciate you coming into the studio as we record this. A little bit of wintry weather in the region, so thanks again for coming in, and be safe out there. Thanks for your time.
Yeah, we appreciate it, Rusty. It's a privilege to be here, and we'll talk to you next time.
Okay. Auction Talk with Steffes Group.